The paintbrush trembled in Daniel's hand as he stared at the blank canvas before him. His small studio was a chaotic mess. Half-finished paintings, discarded sketches, and empty coffee cups scattered everywhere. The once white walls were now a patchwork of colourful smudges, an accidental gallery of his frustration and passion. Daniel, a man of simple dreams but extraordinary talent, had always believed that art could transform lives. Yet, the harsh reality of his own life mocked that belief. Gallery rejections piled up like unpaid bills, each one chiseling away at his confidence. Days blurred together as he painted in the dim light of his cramped room, pouring his soul into masterpieces that no one seemed to notice. But Daniel couldn't stop. Art was his lifeline. One day, drained by rejection and the weight of unfulfilled dreams, Daniel decided to seek inspiration beyond the confines of his studio. He packed his sketchbook, tucked a pencil behind his ear, and stepped into the crisp autumn air. The city's park, with its golden leaves and serene paths, felt like the only place where his restless mind could breathe. On the other side of the city, Amelia Crawford slipped into a plain sweater and jeans. She tied her hair into a loose ponytail and tucked it under a cap. For once, she didn't want to be recognised as the daughter of the billionaire magnate, Charles Crawford. Though gilded with luxury, Amelia's life felt suffocating. Expensive dinners, high society events, and endless expectations had drained her of joy. She longed for simplicity, for a world where people saw her for who she was, not for her wealth. Disguised as an ordinary woman, Amelia wandered the streets until she found herself at the park, a place where no one cared about her last name. Daniel settled on a bench beneath a towering oak tree, sketchbook in hand. As he scanned the scene for inspiration, his gaze landed on a young woman sitting across the path. Amelia. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but her posture carried a quiet sadness. Her hands were clasped, her head tilted slightly to the side as she watched the leaves tumble around her. Sunlight played tricks with her features, casting soft shadows that accentuated her delicate face. Daniel couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about her, something that stirred a deep yearning within him. Without thinking, he picked up his pencil and began to sketch. As he worked, time seemed to stand still. Each stroke of his pencil brought her image to life. The thoughtful expression, the gentle curve of her lips, the way the sunlight kissed her skin. He didn't just capture her appearance, he captured her essence, her quiet grace, and the mystery that surrounded her. Amelia, unaware of her observer, felt a rare peace wash over her. The simplicity of the park reminded her of a world she had only dreamed of, a world unburdened by wealth and pretense. She had no idea that someone was watching her, immortalizing this fleeting moment of authenticity. When Daniel finished the sketch, he leaned back, his heart pounding. He had drawn countless faces before, but this one felt different. There was an unspoken connection between him and the stranger in his sketch, though she didn't even know he existed. As Amelia stood to leave, Daniel felt a pang of regret. He wanted to approach her, to tell her how her presence had inspired him, but his insecurities held him back. She was a vision of elegance even in her simplest attire, while he was just a struggling artist with paint-stained hands. He watched her walk away, clutching the sketch as if it were a fragment of a dream he couldn't let go of. Little did he know, this fleeting encounter was about to change his life forever. Daniel stood outside the grand gates of the Crawford estate, clutching his worn sketchbook and a bag of art supplies. The sprawling mansion before him was a world apart from his modest studio. Marble fountains glistened in the sunlight, and perfectly manicured gardens stretched farther than his eyes could see. For a moment he hesitated, questioning whether he belonged in such a place, but then he thought of Amelia, the woman whose quiet grace had inspired him, and stepped forward. Amelia greeted him in the grand foyer, her warm smile instantly easing his nerves. She led him to a sunlit room with tall windows overlooking the gardens. The space was elegant yet inviting, with stacks of books and scattered cushions hinting at her personal touch. As Daniel set up his easel, Amelia observed him with quiet curiosity. He moved with a calm, focused confidence, his attention entirely on his work. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a billionaire's daughter, but as a person. Their painting sessions soon became a rhythm to their days. Daniel arrived early and they spent hours together. At first, their conversations were polite and surface level, but as the days passed, Amelia began to open up. "I envy you," she confessed one afternoon, her voice soft, almost wistful. Daniel looked up from his canvas, surprised. "Envy me? Why?" "You have freedom," she said, her gaze distant. "You create art. Follow your passions. I've spent my life being told who to be, what to do. Sometimes I don't even know who I really am." Daniel paused, considering her words. "Freedom isn't always easy," he said, his voice thoughtful. "There are nights I wonder if my dreams are worth the struggle. But art? It's the only way I know how to breathe." Their shared vulnerability created a bond neither of them had expected. Amelia found solace in Daniel's authenticity, and he, in turn, was captivated by the depth she hid beneath her poised exterior. As the painting progressed, so did their connection. Daniel began to see beyond Amelia's polished surface. She wasn't just a wealthy heiress. She was a woman yearning for meaning, for freedom. For Amelia, Daniel was a breath of fresh air. His passion, humility, and ability to find beauty in simplicity made her heart race in ways she had never experienced before. One golden afternoon, as sunlight bathed the room, Daniel caught himself staring at her, not as his subject, but as the woman who had become the muse of his heart. Flustered, he quickly looked away, his cheeks flushing. "What?" Amelia asked, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Nothing," Daniel muttered, focusing intently on his brush. But his heart betrayed him, pounding loudly in his chest. Amelia too felt the unspoken tension between them. She found herself looking forward to their sessions, not just for the painting but for the moments they shared. Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. One evening, as Daniel packed up his supplies, Charles Crawford, Amelia's father, walked into the room. His presence was commanding, his sharp eyes scrutinizing Daniel with disdain. "I hear you've been spending a lot of time with my daughter," Mr. Crawford said, his tone cold and unyielding. Daniel straightened, meeting his gaze. "I'm here to paint her portrait, sir." "Is that all?" Mr. Crawford's voice dripped with suspicion. "Men like you see an opportunity and take advantage. I won't have my daughter exploited for some artistic ambition." The words cut deep, but Daniel held his ground. "I would never exploit her," he said firmly. "My only goal is to capture who she truly is." Amelia, overhearing the confrontation from the hallway, froze. She wanted to intervene, to defend Daniel, but fear rooted her in place. Her father's approval had always loomed over her, and now she felt torn between him and the man who had touched her heart. Despite the tension, Daniel poured his soul into the portrait. Each stroke of his brush was infused with his admiration for Amelia, not just for her beauty, but for the strength and vulnerability she carried. When the portrait was finally complete, Daniel delivered it to Amelia. He stood silently as she gazed at the canvas, his heart a mix of pride and uncertainty. Amelia's breath caught. The painting wasn't just an image of her face, it was a reflection of her soul. It revealed her longing, her hidden strength, and the part of herself she had always kept buried. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized how deeply Daniel understood her. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Daniel smiled softly, though a bittersweet ache lingered in his chest. "I'm glad you like it." In that moment, Amelia knew she couldn't let him go. But with her father's disapproval and the vast divide between their worlds, the path ahead was uncertain. And anything but easy. And the first time Daniel entered Amelia's grand estate, he felt like an uninvited guest in a world of untouchable elegance. The sprawling gardens seemed to stretch endlessly, and the mansion's towering columns exuded a regal charm that left him awestruck. Every corner of the estate whispered wealth and grandeur, ornate chandeliers, priceless art adorning the walls, and servants who moved silently, ensuring perfection in every detail. But it wasn't the opulence that captivated Daniel. It was the contrast. Beneath the grandeur, a stillness lingered, a quiet loneliness that seemed woven into the very fabric of the estate. He saw it in the way Amelia moved through the hallways, her smile radiant but fleeting, her laughter melodic yet distant. "Quite the difference from your studio, isn't it?" Amelia asked playfully, breaking his reverie. Daniel chuckled nervously, adjusting the strap of his art bag. "Just a little," he replied, though the understatement made them both laugh. Amelia led him to the sunroom, a space bathed in golden light and alive with warmth. "This is my favourite room," she said, her tone soft but certain. "The rest of the house feels cold. But here, it's different." Daniel set up his easel, glancing around at the inviting room. It was a reflection of Amelia herself, elegant yet approachable, vibrant yet tinged with an unspoken sadness. As days turned into weeks, their painting sessions became more than work. They became a sanctuary. In that sunlit room, two souls from vastly different worlds shed their facades and let their true selves emerge. "Do you ever wish for something else?" Amelia asked one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel paused, his brush hovering mid-air. "Something else?" "A different life," she clarified, her gaze drifting to the window where the gardens stretched endlessly, a gilded cage she couldn't escape. "Something simpler, free from expectations, from the weight of being someone you're not." Daniel placed his brush down, his eyes softening. "All the time. But for me, it's not about escaping wealth or expectations. It's about proving that I'm enough, that my work matters, that I matter." Amelia turned to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You do matter, Daniel. More than you realize." Their conversations grew deeper, more intimate. Amelia revealed the pressures of her life, the constant scrutiny, the impossible standards, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who only saw her wealth. In return, Daniel shared the sting of rejection, the fear of failure, and the relentless pursuit of a dream that often felt out of reach. Each shared story wove an invisible thread between them, drawing their hearts closer with every passing day. As the portrait began to take shape, so did Daniel's feelings. At first, he dismissed the flutter in his chest as simple admiration for Amelia's beauty and grace. But as he spent more time with her, he realized it was much more than that. It wasn't just her appearance, it was the way she listened with genuine interest, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she saw him, not as a struggling artist, but as a man with dreams and worth. But the gap between their worlds loomed large in Daniel's mind. How could someone like Amelia, a woman born into privilege and power, ever see him as more than the artist painting her portrait? One golden afternoon, Daniel found himself staring at her. She sat by the window, her head tilted slightly as she gazed outside. The sunlight caught in her hair, framing her face like a halo. "What?" she asked, catching him in the act. Daniel quickly looked away, his cheeks burning. "Nothing," he muttered, pretending to adjust his canvas. Amelia's lips curled into a soft smile. She had noticed the way he looked at her, the hesitation in his voice, the way his presence made her heart race. But she remained silent, unsure if her feelings were mutual or if they were simply her imagination. As the portrait neared completion, the unspoken tension between them grew. Daniel poured every ounce of his emotions into the painting, each stroke of his brush a silent confession of the feelings he couldn't put into words. Amelia watched him work, her heart heavy with emotions she couldn't name. She admired his passion, his humility, and his ability to see her for who she truly was, not the version of herself the world demanded. But a question lingered in her mind. What would happen when the portrait was finished? Would Daniel walk away, taking his quiet charm and genuine warmth with him? Would she be left behind, trapped in her gilded cage, longing for something she could never have? As they stood on the brink of something unspoken, neither dared to take the leap, afraid of the consequences of crossing the invisible line that separated their worlds. The soft golden hues of the sunroom's background were nearly complete when the door burst open, shattering the serene atmosphere. Charles Crawford, Amelia's father, strode in with an air of authority that felt suffocating. His sharp suit and commanding presence were a stark reminder of the power and privilege that divided Daniel from this world. "What is the meaning of this?" Mr. Crawford's voice echoed through the high ceilings, sharp and accusatory. Daniel froze, his brush suspended mid-air, as the older man's piercing gaze bore into him. Slowly he turned, his pulse quickening. "I'm painting a portrait of Amelia," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the tension tightening his chest. "For what purpose?" Mr. Crawford snapped, suspicion dripping from his words. "To gain her favour? To exploit her for your own benefit? I've seen your kind before. Parasites clinging to wealth they can never hope to earn." The accusation struck Daniel like a physical blow, but he forced himself to stand his ground. "I didn't approach Amelia," he replied evenly. "She came to me. She believed in my work, and that's all this is. My work." Mr. Crawford's lips twisted into a cold, dismissive smile. "Your work? Or your ticket out of poverty? Don't think I don't see through this act. I won't let you manipulate my daughter for your ambitions." Behind the partially open door, Amelia stood frozen, drawn by the sound of her father's raised voice. Her heart ached as she watched Daniel, standing defensively under the weight of her father's accusations. She wanted to step forward, to defend Daniel, to tell her father he was wrong. But the years of living in her father's shadow, of bending to his will, held her back. The fear of his disapproval felt like a chain around her ankles, immobilizing her. As Mr. Crawford continued his tirade, Daniel's eyes darted toward the door. For a brief moment, he caught sight of Amelia. Her expression conflicted. Their eyes met, and Daniel's gaze silently pleaded with her to speak. But she hesitated. Her throat tightened, and her hand gripped the doorframe as guilt and fear churned in her stomach. She turned away, unable to muster the courage to confront her father. The silent betrayal cut through Daniel like a blade. The woman who had inspired him, who had confided in him and shared her deepest sorrows, remained silent. "I see," Daniel said quietly, stepping away from his easel. His voice was calm, but the pain was evident in his tone. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Crawford. I'll finish the portrait and leave." That night, Daniel returned to his modest studio, his emotions a tumultuous storm. He wanted to abandon the portrait, to leave it unfinished and walk away from the entire ordeal. But every time he thought of Amelia, her vulnerability, her yearning for freedom, the way she had become his muse, he couldn't bring himself to stop. "This is about more than her father," Daniel whispered to himself as he stared at the canvas. "This is about her." With renewed determination, he picked up his brush and poured his soul into the painting. Every stroke became a reflection of his emotions, his admiration for Amelia, his frustration with her silence, and the unspoken depth of his feelings for her. Through the night, he worked tirelessly, capturing every nuance of her expression, the light in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture, and the shadows of longing and restraint that only he seemed to understand. By dawn, the portrait was complete. It was his finest work, a masterpiece that laid bare not just Amelia's essence but his own. Daniel gazed at the finished painting, a bittersweet ache settling in his chest. It was beautiful, yet it felt like a farewell, a testament to a connection that might never have the chance to flourish. Carefully, He wrapped the portrait, preparing to deliver it to Amelia. He wasn't sure what would happen next or if they would ever speak again, but he knew one thing for certain. He would honor the promise he had made to her. This portrait wasn't just a work of art. It was a piece of him, a silent confession of everything he couldn't put into words. Daniel stood at the imposing Crawford estate, the wrapped portrait in his hands feeling heavier than it should. He had rehearsed countless conversations in his mind, yet as he stared at the grand doors, his words escaped him. Taking a deep breath, he rang the bell, his resolve firm despite the storm of emotions within. Amelia opened the door, her expression a mix of relief and hesitation. Without a word, she led him to the sunroom, the place where their connection had blossomed amid the glow of sunlight and shared vulnerability. Daniel carefully unwrapped the portrait, his hands steady though his heart raced. He stepped back, revealing his masterpiece. "This is it," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. Amelia's breath caught as her eyes fell on the painting. She stood frozen, her gaze locked on the canvas. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of her sharp inhale. The portrait wasn't merely a representation of her, it was a revelation. Daniel had captured the facets of her soul that she had hidden even from herself. Vulnerability mingled with strength, and a yearning for freedom shone through the strokes. It was hauntingly beautiful, a mirror to her innermost being. "Daniel," her voice cracked, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Daniel watched her reaction, his own heart tight with emotion. "I wanted to show you how I see you," he said, his voice trembling. "Not the heiress, not the daughter of a powerful man, but the real you." Amelia's tears spilled over as she turned to him, her expression raw and unguarded. "No one has ever seen me like this," she whispered. "Not even me." He smiled faintly, his eyes locked on hers. "It's who you've always been, Amelia. You just needed someone to remind you." The weight of his words settled over her, stirring something deep within. She felt exposed, but for the first time she didn't fear it. Instead, she felt understood, truly seen. The moment was shattered by the sound of footsteps. Mr. Crawford entered the room, his commanding presence extinguishing the warmth in the air. His eyes darted between Amelia, Daniel, and the unveiled painting, his expression darkening. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice cold and sharp. Amelia squared her shoulders, her newfound strength rising to the surface. "It's my portrait, father, and it's beautiful." Mr. Crawford's gaze fell on the painting, his lips thinning as he absorbed the raw emotion it conveyed. "This is inappropriate," he declared. "This man has no place here." Daniel stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "With all due respect, sir, I was hired to create this portrait. It's complete, and my work here is done." He turned to leave, but Amelia's hand on his arm stopped him. "No," she said, her voice steady. "You're not going anywhere." Mr. Crawford's expression hardened. "Amelia, what do you think you're doing?" "What I should have done long ago," she replied, her tone unwavering. "This portrait isn't just a painting. It's a reflection of me. And Daniel didn't just create it, he saw me. Something no one else, not even you, has ever done." Her father opened his mouth to retort, but Amelia silenced him with a firm glance. Turning to Daniel, her eyes softened. "I'm sorry for not standing up for you before," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "You deserved better." Daniel's expression softened, his voice gentle. "You don't have to apologize. I understand." Amelia shook her head. "No, you don't. I've spent my life trying to live up to everyone else's expectations. You've shown me a version of myself I didn't know existed, and I can't ignore that anymore." The tension in the room thickened as their unspoken emotions surfaced. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Amelia, I don't belong in your world. I'm just an artist trying to make his way." She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "And I'm just a woman trying to find hers. Maybe we can figure it out together." Mr. Crawford began to protest, but Amelia silenced him with a glance sharper than any words. "This is my life," she said firmly, "and I'm choosing to live it on my terms." Daniel searched her face, his heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and hope. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Amelia smiled through her tears, her resolve clear. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Amelia stood in the sunroom, her presence commanding in a way that felt unfamiliar yet utterly natural. Facing her father, she let her words flow from the depths of her heart, unburdened by the fear that had once tethered her. "Father," she began, her voice steady, "I've spent my life trying to fit into the mold you created for me. I did everything to earn your approval, but in the process, I lost myself. This portrait, it's more than art. It's a reflection of the person I've hidden away for so long. And I won't let anyone, not even you, take that away from me." Mr. Crawford, always composed and unyielding, looked taken aback. His stern facade cracked for a fleeting moment, revealing a flicker of doubt. "Amelia," he started, his tone less commanding, "I've only ever wanted what's best for you." She held her ground, her gaze unwavering. "What's best for me is to live a life that's truly mine. Daniel didn't take advantage of me. He helped me see myself, the real me. I owe him, and myself, the chance to embrace that." Her words hung in the air, reverberating with a finality that silenced the room. News of the portrait's unveiling quickly spread, fueled by Amelia's decision to share it on social media. Her heartfelt post described it as a transformative work, a masterpiece that unveiled her essence in a way she had never imagined. The world responded. Art critics hailed Daniel's work as revolutionary, and collectors clamoured for his pieces. An invitation from a renowned gallery arrived, offering Daniel the chance to showcase his work on an international stage. Amelia, undeterred by her father's lingering disapproval, celebrated Daniel's success openly. Despite the media frenzy and whispers about their relationship, she refused to hide their connection. And the day after the portrait's unveiling, Amelia arrived at Daniel's studio unannounced. She stood at the entrance, her smile radiant yet humble. "I hear you're about to conquer the art world," she teased lightly, her voice warm. Daniel turned from his easel, his heart lifting at the sight of her. "If that's true, it's because of you," he said, his tone sincere. Amelia stepped closer, shaking her head. "No, Daniel, it's because of you. Your talent, your passion, your heart. I just gave the world a glimpse of what I've always seen in you." Her words struck a chord, stirring emotions he couldn't contain. "Amelia," he said, his voice low, "are you sure about this? About us? We come from such different worlds." She reached for his hand, her touch grounding him. "Different doesn't mean impossible. I don't care about the money, the expectations, or the opinions of strangers. I care about you, about us. That's all that matters." And their journey wasn't without its struggles. Mr. Crawford, though begrudgingly accepting of Amelia's independence, remained skeptical of Daniel's intentions. The media speculated endlessly about their relationship, labeling it everything from a fairy tale to a scandal. Yet, Daniel and Amelia weathered it all. Their bond became their strength, a testament to the love that had bridged the gap between their worlds. Daniel's career flourished beyond his wildest dreams. The gallery exhibition was a triumph, with his work receiving universal acclaim. Collectors vied for his pieces, but the true reward lay in the belief and support Amelia had shown him. For Amelia, life began anew. She left behind the corporate world her father had envisioned for her, delving into her own passions: philanthropy, creative writing, and championing emerging artists like Daniel. Together, they carved out a life that was uniquely theirs. One crisp evening, after the successful opening of another gallery show, Daniel led Amelia to the rooftop of his apartment. The city lights shimmered around them, a sea of stars mirroring the ones above. Amelia, Daniel began, his voice thick with emotion. For so long I felt like something was missing. Then I met you. You've given my life meaning in a way I never thought possible. Amelia smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. And you've shown me that it's okay to be myself. With you, I've found a freedom I didn't think existed. Under the vast, starlit sky, they stood hand in hand, knowing their love had defied expectations and bridged every divide. No matter where life took them, they were certain of one thing. Together, they could face anything. The gallery thrummed with life, a mosaic of conversations, laughter and applause filling the air. At the heart of it all was the painting that had captivated the world. Unveiled, Daniel's portrait of Amelia stood as the centerpiece, a powerful testament to vulnerability, strength, and self-discovery. Critics praised the depth of emotion, collectors vied for a chance to acquire Daniel's work, and art enthusiasts marveled at the narrative the painting told. But for Daniel, the night's most important presence wasn't the crowd. It was Amelia, standing beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, Amelia exuded grace. Her smile was radiant, but what truly captivated those around her was the unshakable confidence she carried. In that moment, she wasn't defined by her wealth or family name. She was simply a woman who had embraced her truth and love. As Daniel stepped forward to give his speech, a hush fell over the room. His voice, though humble, carried the weight of his gratitude. "I stand here tonight because of one person," he began, his eyes finding Amelia in the crowd. "Amelia believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. She saw something in me that I didn't know was there. Unveiled is as much her story as it is mine. It's about finding the courage to see ourselves clearly and share that truth with the world. For that, I'll be forever grateful." Thunderous applause followed, but Daniel's focus remained on Amelia. Later that evening, Daniel guided Amelia to a quieter corner of the gallery. Draped under a white cloth was a second painting. Amelia tilted her head, curious. "Another surprise?" Daniel smiled, his nerves evident, but his excitement palpable. "A gift," he said simply. Pulling back the cloth, he revealed a softer, more intimate portrait. It captured Amelia in a quiet moment, seated by the sunroom window, her face bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Her expression was serene yet hopeful, a testament to her journey and transformation. Amelia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Daniel, it's exquisite. I don't even know what to say." Daniel stepped closer, his voice tender. "This is how I see you, always. A source of light and strength, my muse, my everything." Overcome with emotion, Amelia turned to him, her voice breaking. "You don't just paint, Daniel. You see people in ways they can't even see themselves. You've changed my life." The gallery attendees began to notice the intimate exchange, their curiosity drawing them closer. Sensing their attention, Amelia turned to address the crowd. "I've spent much of my life being known as Amelia Crawford, the daughter of Charles Crawford," she said, her voice steady. "But tonight, I'm here as myself. Just Amelia. And I want the world to know how proud I am to stand beside Daniel, a man whose art not only reveals truths, but also inspires transformation." The applause was immediate, a wave of support and admiration for the couple. Overwhelmed by the moment, Daniel pulled Amelia into his arms, their kiss sealing a love story that had captured the hearts of everyone in the room. In the weeks that followed, their journey became a beacon of inspiration. Daniel's career reached new heights, his work celebrated as a symbol of authenticity and emotional depth. Amelia, too, found her calling, stepping away from her father's empire to establish a foundation supporting aspiring artists. Their love story, though unconventional, became a testament to the power of defying expectations and following one's heart. One evening, as the city's lights shimmered against the darkened sky, Daniel and Amelia returned to the rooftop of his apartment. It was where their journey had shifted from possibility to certainty. As they stood hand in hand, Daniel turned to her, a small velvet box in his palm. "Amelia," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "You've given my life meaning I never thought possible. You've shown me love, courage, and the beauty of being seen. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving how much that means to me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, Daniel. 1,000 times, yes." With trembling hands, he slid the ring onto her finger, and they embraced under the stars. And their story wasn't just about love, it was about transformation, courage, and finding freedom in authenticity. Together, Daniel and Amelia created a life that was their greatest masterpiece, a canvas painted with passion, resilience, and the undeniable beauty of a love that transcended all boundaries. And as they stood there, the city sprawling around them, their hands intertwined, they knew they had found something priceless: each other.